Hello, a warm welcome to Middle East Matters right here on France 24. In Syria, a Sunni rebel alliance took the strategic town of Jisr al-Shagha earlier in April, opening the way for further attacks across the country. Hope for Syrian refugees who've lost limbs in the long-running conflict. New technology could provide amputees with customised prosthetic limbs for a fraction of the current price. And finally, Oriental dance with a masculine touch. In Lebanon, one male choreographer and dancer challenges gender stereotypes, creating a new approach to Egyptian folk dance. We begin in Syria, where a Sunni rebel alliance took the strategic town of Jisr al-Shagha earlier in April, opening the way for further attacks across the country. Amongst the key players of the coalition, al-Nusra Front is a force that's now cooperating with groups that were once vetted by Washington and received US-made anti-tank missiles. The details with Sanam Chantier.
Islamist insurgents overrunning the stronghold in Syria to the chants of Allahu Akbar. Amongst the al-Qaeda-affiliated Nusra Front, the capture of the northwestern strategic town is the latest in a series of setbacks for government forces in the war-torn country. Today, Jisr al-Shagha is fully controlled by the Sunni rebels. The question now is whether this signals a comeback for al-Nusra. Only 6 months ago, with limited funds and weapons, they appeared to be losing their battle to their biggest rival, the Islamic State group. But shortly after the US-led coalition airstrike campaign against the self-declared state, they made up lost ground, capturing Idlib in March, whilst bolstering their revolt against President Bashar al-Assad.
The capture of Idlib could only happen after Jabhat al-Nusra had already built up credibility as a result of showing itself as the only militant group able to deliver results on the ground against the regime in Syria. That has helped it win local support, which also translated into sharing of intelligence by local communities in areas around Idlib.
Some fear in an attempt to strengthen their footprint, al-Nusra may seek to create yet another jihadi enclave in Syria, but for the time being, they're too small in numbers.
Remember that Jabhat al-Nusra came from outside the country. So it has tried to make its success on integrating, becoming part of Syria. There is no way, not only militarily, but politically, that it can do that without some type of alliance with other Syrian groups.
Meanwhile, some argue that al-Nusra could become an ally in the international fight against the Islamic State group in a bid to widen its own influence.
Well, next, last week, the Arab military coalition led by Saudi Arabia formally ended its nearly month-long air campaign in Yemen. Reports on the ground, though, suggest that strikes have continued, leaving many to question Riyadh's strategy and overarching goal in Yemen. Kate Moody takes a look.
This house near Sana'a lies in ruins. It was one of the casualties of the Saudi-led Operation Decisive Storm, a nearly month-long military campaign which the coalition's spokesman told France 24 was an overall success.
The objectives that were defined at the beginning of the operation have been realized. Protecting the legitimacy of Yemen's president, destroying the military capacities of the Houthi militia, which continue to attack towns, and destroy the capacity to threaten Yemen's neighbors, notably the borders of Saudi Arabia.
But the situation on the ground seems to tell a different story. Despite some setbacks, the Shiite Houthi rebels continue to fight undeterred.
When you look at the reality on the ground, you see the Houthis' strong presence on the outskirts of Aden. They still haven't gone back to their traditional stronghold in the north of Yemen. Far from it. That raises the question of whether discussions and negotiations will be necessary to end the crisis.
While much of the international community is still pushing for a diplomatic solution, it remains unlikely. The Houthis have said they won't consider any dialogue until all airstrikes are ended indefinitely. And analysts say Riyadh and its Sunni Arab neighbors may not be ready to close the door entirely on their military involvement, which some believe amounts to a proxy war against the Houthis' principal backers, the Shiite government of Iran. The increasingly sectarian regional divide is also leaving room for al-Qaeda militants to dig in.
Il y a un phénomène d'implantation durable. Et
The group is settling in for the long term.
Que finalement, aux yeux de certains, de
Many Sunnis now see Al-Qaeda as the only Sunni force that can really stand up to pressure of the Shiite Houthis.
Le seul instrument finalement susceptible éventuellement de faire obstacle à la pression aux chiites houthis.
With the Houthis as a common enemy, the Saudi government finds itself on the same side as al-Qaeda, an unexpected, if unplanned, pairing that could raise tensions between Riyadh and Washington.
The Syrian conflict has killed over 200,000 people and injured many, some of whom have lost limbs. Well, until now, for many Syrian refugees, getting a prosthetic limb seemed out of reach, but a new technology has surfaced that could provide amputees with customised prosthetic limbs for a fraction of the current price. While using 3D printers, the Refugee Open Wear Initiative is helping more victims in Jordan regain their lost limbs as well as hope.
Raja was evacuated to Jordan a couple of months ago after losing both legs in a bombing in Syria. Since then, he's been living in this rehabilitation centre. The fingers of his left hand were also cut off in the explosion. Today, 2 men have come to test a revolutionary prosthetic on the 13-year-old boy.
Ask him a bit. There's really no good solution that's low cost today in Jordan. Generally, we would give them just a cosmetic hand. And even that cosmetic hand would cost at least $300. And so this hand that we produce through 3D printing with a flexible polymer called elastomer is under $10 to make.
This American social entrepreneur is the founder of the initiative, developing prostheses for some of the 200,000 Syrian war amputees. He's assisted by Assem, a former paramedic in the rebellion.
We're working now to make a 3D printed socket, especially for like a carbon fiber one. It will look like.
Wounded in the bombing of his ambulance, he's now started a new fight, bringing hope back to amputees through affordable prosthetics. This is where the process happens, at the heart of a modern business incubator in Amman. For the past 3 months, the team's been modelling wounded limbs and printing artificial hands, an avant-garde technology within everyone's reach.
So this was my first hand. After 1 month of learning 3D printing, I did that one.
The whole objective of this project is to bring a very big open source movement around 3D printed prosthetics to the area that we believe needs it the most, which is the Syrian conflict.
Syria, but also Iraq and Yemen. This hospital houses war victims from across the region. Zain lost his hand in a fire in Yemen. Say he can drink and eat like any other 6-year-old, thanks to Assem, who made him a customised prosthetic with his favourite superhero's logo and watch. It might seem like a design detail, but this does make a difference.
The acceptance of the prosthetics is greater. The child has not left it since he received it last week. This technology for us is promising.
As funding for the refugee crisis shrinks dramatically amid growing regional turmoil, this new technology could help patch up many amputees' futures.
And finally, Oriental dance has traditionally been associated with women in exposing costumes, making sensual movements. But one male dancer and choreographer in Lebanon has been challenging gender stereotypes. He's created a new approach to baladi, also known as Egyptian folk dance, with a touch of masculinity.
He doesn't like to call it belly dancing. Alexandra Polikovich performs his version of baladi, or Egyptian folk dance. The artist has been studying these flowing movements for the last decade and says he wants to breathe new life into the ancient dance. He rejects its traditional portrayal as an art of seduction, performed by women.
I want to send a message that is, stop focusing on the belly and eroticism and seeing through a prism, interpreting it as nothing more than a woman seducing a man with her sensual dance. And what's the point of having half-naked dancers in societies that want them veiled more and more?
The openly gay performer isn't afraid of breaking taboos, dancing in tight-fitting feminine dresses, or sometimes with nothing at all. Through his body movements, Polikevich tries to express the pains and frustration that one could feel in traditional Lebanese society. Feminine dresses, or sometimes with nothing at all. Through his body movements, Polikevich tries to express the pains and frustration that one could feel in traditional Lebanese society. After studying in Paris, he returned to his native Beirut in 2006 to pursue his artistic career. Here, he's rehearsing for his new show. The dancer's target audience is in the Arab world.
Even if our society is underdeveloped and not up to date, we can still be different. These body movements do not differ from a woman to a man. I don't think the audience likes me because I take a modern approach to this dance, but simply because I dance well.
Nicknamed the King of Scandals, Alexander Polikevich likes to provoke through his dance. He says he wants to beat